everyone. Welcome back to Not Safe for Work. I'm Chloe, your host. I'm so excited for today's guest because I'm mixing things up a little bit. Every guest thus far and everyone I've brought in thus far, you may have noticed kind of a pattern of like the vibe of like nightlife, party, you know, that kind of overlapping in some sort of audience scene. And I was thinking about it a bunch and I was like, wow, these are hot jobs. But I feel like I'm limiting the scope of hot jobs because really what a hot job isn't limited to any which industry or anything like that. You know, it's something that can be present in all different types of employment. And so I'm really excited to mix it up today with this week's guest. So with that, I'm so excited to introduce Red Stein, PhD student and scientist studying past climate change.
Correct.
Hey, Red. Welcome to Not Safe for Work.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
I know. It's so great to have you. I know that you're used to being on the other side of the microphone. So we can kind of do like a little...
I'm not used to cameras. That's a big thing.
I hate the cameras too. I'm like, don't look at me. I wish, honestly... If I didn't need to promote this podcast, I wouldn't have video, but
you do.
How are you guys going to find out about it if I'm not posting clips about it?
Right, exactly.
So, yeah. No,
marketing potential.
I feel the same way.
It's much better.
No one perceived me, YouTube watchers.
Yeah.
But I'm really excited to talk to you today and talk about a little bit about what you do. Like I said, it's like different from anything that I feel like most people have experience with. I think when you think about science, it's something that like, unless you went to school for it or you're really got a special interest there. Yeah. First of all, it's a really broad science, very broad topic. But also just like from a career perspective, like it is something that typically does require a lot of schooling, hence you being a PhD candidate.
Right. I was going to say, I definitely come from that background of having a lot of schooling in it. So
how long have you been in school?
Well, I never took a break. So I went straight from high school to undergrad, and then I went straight from undergrad to a PhD program. So, I'm 24, so probably 20 years-ish.
So most of your life.
Constant school, yeah.
So the only time you weren't learning anything were the first 4 years of your life. And then you're like, all right, let's hit the ground running.
I was like, yeah, let's go.
You're like, all right, I've rested up.
And also like the first month of COVID, probably.
Okay. Yeah. No one was learning anything. No one was learning anything. Except for TikTok dances.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So,
that's fair.
Yeah.
Well, that's really cool. And so you being in school now, I mean, like as a PhD, are you in school over the summer?
Yeah. I mean, the job kind of never stops. So my job as a PhD student is to do research and to teach and things like that. We also have to take classes, but those are limited to like the traditional school year. So like fall and spring. So I'm probably going to take some classes in the fall. And as of now, I'm just doing my own research.
And are the classes, they're relevant to what you're taking?
Yeah, they're all, I mean, some of them are breadth, which means it has to kind of go outside the scope of what you do. So I study past climate change, but I've taken classes on volcanoes and that counts. But they're all kind of within the realm of like earth sciences.
Got it. Okay, That makes sense. It's not like your freshman year of liberal arts school where you have to take dance to fill an elective, right? Okay,
I do try to like broaden it a little. I've taken classes in history and anthro and things that I think gives you a better perspective on science. But yeah, I've justified it in that way. It's like, oh, I'm taking this history class because it will tell me more about science.
I love that. I mean, that's awesome. And it's really healthy to, I think about I feel like I think about this a lot when I'm doing a podcast, but my main job is throwing parties and I also work a bunch in weed, but they all kind of...
Yeah, they mesh together.
And it's a similar kind of concept. So I want to start there. Tell us about your job, your day-to-day. Like how do you spend your time today?
Well, I think it's super variable depending on like where I'm at with a certain project. So what I do is I study how Earth's climate has changed in the past. And I look at kind of different timescales, all within recent history relative to kind of Earth history as a whole. So
what does that mean, recent history?
Well, okay, right. So recent history to me is like the last 50,000 years.
Right.
Very recent. Like I was thinking about...
like last week, the last 50,000 years
50,000 years or so. That's very, very recent,
Okay.
Like, Earth is many billions of years old and, people who I work with study deep time, which is well beyond what I do. So I study very recent climate change. So one of my projects is looking at the last 50,000 years. One of them is looking at 7,000 years. It kind of depends on where I am and what archives I have access to. But If I'm just starting a project, I'm doing a lot of lab work. So I'm at my research institution in a chemistry lab, pipetting things and moving liquids from one place to another and putting things into instruments that measure things. And if I'm kind of at the end of the project, which is where I'm at now for a few different things, then I'm mostly working on data analysis and coding and writing and turning those things into presentations and papers. So,
and I know a lot of your job also, like, you go places and collect samples, or you touch grass, so to speak.
We do touch grass.
What is that element as well?
So we would call that broadly field work. Field work looks totally different depending on what you study. My kind of archive of choice for studying past climate change is lake sediments. So, you have a lake and you have things accumulating at the bottom, and you essentially take a tube and hammer it down into the bottom of the lake, and the stuff at the top is the youngest and at the bottom is the oldest. And if you study things from the top to the bottom, that tells you about how Earth's climate has changed over that time interval that it was accumulating. So for me, field work looks like going and collecting those cores. So going to cool places and floating out on like a metal platform and collecting these big lake sediment cores.
And so it's like a contraption that like goes down to the bottom of the lake.
Yeah, it's called a piston core. It's actually quite like, I think you expect science to have really advanced technology and machinery, but it really is kind of a tube that you drop and then hammer into the ground.
Okay.
It's a very human design, you know what I mean? It's just practical. So,
and so then what does the information then tell you? So you pull this out and you see that there's all this information that you're gathering from, the last 50,000 years, recent stuff.
Yeah. Recent things. Yeah.
Like what do you see? What do you learn? What does that tell you?
So I use what are called lipid biomarkers. So they're essentially fats that are preserved in these sediment cores, and they're produced by different things, mostly plants and bacteria and other little bugs. And they record things about the environment that they grew in. So if you have a plant that grew in a hotter climate, you'd be able to distinguish that, or I should say a wetter climate, or it really depends. But if you have a plant that grew in one climate and a plant that grew in another climate, you'd be able to distinguish something about the difference between those two climates if you extract those plants from your lake sediment. So basically what I do is I put together records of things like past rainfall, temperature. I do work in bile acids, which is just a poop biomarker, and it tells you if animals were there. That's kind of a new, exciting proxy that we're working on.
I love that.
It's fun.
Poop science.
Yeah, poop science. I'm really trying not to kind of get too deep into the niche of being a poop scientist, but it is quite interesting in the high Arctic. So it depends on. You're essentially trying to understand something about how atmospheric dynamics or oceanic dynamics or something about Earth's climate has changed and why. And then I kind of do an additional step, which is when I'm looking at really recent things. So like the past, 2,000 to 6,000 years, depending on where I'm looking. Really recent things. Then I'm also interested in looking at like human connections. So how did the climate maybe influence or provide context for sociocultural developments that are happening in different locations. So I study Rapa Nui, which is also known as Easter Island, which is like a really, really remote island off the coast of Chile. And then I study the high Arctic, specifically Northeast Greenland.
Do you go to these places?
So I've never been to Rapa Nui, which is unfortunate. I've been working on this project for so many years, but we had the samples by the time I got to school. And then I've been to Greenland, not for this project, but I was able to go and collect samples for like a different project interested in similar questions.
So when you're collecting samples now, where are you?
The thing that I am interested in applying for funding for now will take me to Rochester, New York. So nowhere.
Go Bills.
Yeah, nowhere exciting. Isn't that Buffalo?
Yeah, that's Buffalo. But if someone says anything near there, I have to say that because
Go Bills.
I actually said it in the very first episode of the podcast with Ella Yerman, because they mentioned they're from there or something like that.
Yeah.
And so we talked about sports for a moment. And here I am talking about sports again, and I can't believe it. And let's get out of this.
Please. Yeah. So that's
that's cool though.
I mean, we'll see. It's something I'm interested in applying for funding for. But I go to Norway on occasion to work on lab projects. So it's not doing field work. It's to just work in a lab at the University of Bergen, which is great. And I'm hoping to go again. So I went there think I went there. No, I just went there once, but I'm hopefully going to go again at some point in the next year.
And when you're studying climates of different regions,
Yeah.
you know, whether it's Rochester, Chile, you know, Norway, whatever, are like, what are you learning about the difference of also like the past 50,000 years in these different environments?
So like a good example would be Rapa Nui. I have this 50,000 year record of, it's called leaf wax isotopes, but it essentially tells you how much it's raining. So I have a 50,000 year record, and then I have a much higher resolution 2,000 year record. The 2,000 year record I'm using to understand how droughts might have impacted the Rapa Nui people who arrived there. This is very, if any of my colleagues are watching, this is very up for debate. I know that, but they maybe arrived in like 1200 CE. And there was kind of this growth and boom of the this thing called the Ahu Moai culture, which is the big head statues everyone knows. Mm-hmm. So we're kind of trying to understand how like rainfall dynamics played into that. If they were able to participate in these really large like megalithic statue construction events because there was, for example, like a big influx of fresh water and they had all of the resources that they needed. And then maybe those resources were depleted over time because the climate changed. So we're trying to understand that on the human side of things. And then on the climate side of things, if rainfall dynamics did change over Rapa Nui, our question is why? Like what atmospheric change must have happened to cause that? So we look at modern climate to understand what drives like drought over Rapa Nui, and then we kind of extrapolate that into the past. So the thing I look at is like changes in the position and the strength of the South Pacific anticyclone.
What is the South Pacific anticyclone? Yeah, what is that?
It's just like a high pressure center at about 30 degrees south latitude, and it rotates, and it's a region that is dry and it's just a major atmospheric system in the area, and it interacts with other atmospheric systems. You know, when one moves, the other moves. When they get stronger, other things happen, and we're trying to understand all of that and how it works. So,
I mean, when did you start studying? I mean, in college, like undergrad, were you already focused in science? Did you know you wanted to do this specifically? Like, how did this trajectory go?
I mean, I was always in science. I started doing research when I was 17, I think. My first research job was in high school. And those have been the majority of my jobs have been research jobs. I was not in geoscience. I only have been in geoscience for, I want to say maybe 4 years. So not a long time. I've been in chemistry for a really long time. I started college in chemical engineering or biomedical engineering. I wasn't really sure. And then transitioned into doing pure chemistry. So not really engineering at all, just chemistry. I had a brief fling with art restoration and wanting to do that, which is still something I'd like to do in the future, which has a lot of interplay with chemistry, interestingly. And then from there found geosciences. So I kind of really moved around a lot and had a lot of projects along the way that were unrelated to any of those things. So I definitely took college to like explore a lot of different areas.
I think it's really interesting too, just from the perspective of like the amount of schooling that's needed for this. I know like me and you had chatted last week and you were saying like, is this something that people are going to feel is cool because like you have to go to school and like, that's cool. Like a lot of jobs you do have to go to school and I'm sure some of you listening are in school and or younger. But I mean, I'm curious to hear about kind of your perspective of like really falling into, you know, not just something that you're going to school, that you're chasing a specific career, but you're actually like studying something bigger. Like, how do you think about kind of making that decision?
About what to study generally?
What to study, and also just like getting into the concept of science where it's not necessarily going to be like, okay, I'm going to school for communications because I want to work at a PR firm.
It's not that. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of why I like it. And that's why the concept of leaving school is very daunting to me because it's not really for me career motivated. It's just I'm studying what I'm interested in because it's cool and I enjoy it. And I mean, that's part of what I guess the future career goal would be to fall into a teaching and research role where I could continue to do that and just ask questions that I'm interested in and pursue funding for those. But yeah, I think like there are people who are in this field who are career motivated, who, you know, who are studying something super specific because they want to go work at a startup, studying carbon neutral technologies or carbon capture technologies, and they want to go do that. That's pretty rare. Most people who are PhD students in science are doing it because they're interested in studying this specific thing and they just want to dedicate that much time to it. So yeah, that's why I enjoy school so much. I find it hard to imagine being so career oriented. I'm just doing what's fun and interesting.
Your job is almost going to school.
My job is going to school.
Yeah,
I get paid to go to school. So
that's crazy.
Yeah, you do get paid for a PhD, contrary to popular belief. At most places, at all places, I don't know. At my place,
I think that's like a thing.
It is a thing.
Yeah. And your doctor at the end of this, how many years away are we from calling you doctor? Because I personally, once I just realized that, I can't wait.
And I feel like Dr. Stein, for some reason, is quite like 70s almost. Do you know what I mean? It is sexy.
It's
I like
sexy.
it.
I didn't even know Red's last name until today, and I was like, wait, Stein. I just feel like I would have known.
It's boring, right? Until you stick a doctor in front of it.
Red Stein is hot.
Yeah, and isn't it funny because Stein is like rock in German.
Oh my God.
I should study iron inclusions in rocks. I've said this for years, but I don't. But I could, and that would be very appropriate. Yeah, I think I have like 3 years left probably. I have guaranteed funding, I think, for 3 more years. So after that, we'll see. I'm still very unsure of what's next, but I would probably go to continue research in like a postdoc position.
What advice do you have for people who do want to get paid to go to school? People who want to seek PhD programs?
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily have to be science, but maybe specific to science.
Oh, totally. If you're interested in doing a PhD program, the biggest thing is who you're working with and what you're studying. It's not like undergrad. Undergrad, I think people look for a particular school. They say, oh, I want to go to Brown, or I want to go to Smith, or I want to go to this. That's very gay options.
Yeah, those are,
sorry.
Are you gay?
They say, I want to go to this place. And it's fine to have like location preferences. But if you're doing a PhD, it should be because you're really interested in learning about a specific thing. And you should find a project that you are really excited about because it's going to be your life for the next many years. And you should find someone who you click with because for the most part, you're working with one person or just a few people, just a few colleagues. So it really matters that you talk to people before you apply and that you explore what's out there in terms of the projects that people are working on. So don't just go to a website and look up like, Smith. No, Smith is an undergrad school. Brown graduate program. You want to go look at a professor's page and look at what they're publishing and read their papers and see if you find them interesting. And if you do reach out and say, hey, I found your paper interesting about this specific thing. This is true in humanities too. This is kind of true in everything. It matters what the person you want to work with will allow you to do and has to offer you. So.
Right. I think that's really interesting. I think can probably sound daunting to someone who okay, I want to go get a PhD in something, but I have kind of a concept and I don't know, where do you start when you're doing research to figure out where to do research?
I think just reading is really important. Like if you, for the most part, when you say, I'm going to go do this project to go to this grad school and that's what you write in your application, you're not bound to it. You can work on something else and that's okay. As long as your, PI, your professor has money for it and will let you do that, then you can do something else. So it's okay to have a general concept of what you want to do, but you want to know what your options are. So you want to go to, scholar.google.com and you want to look up articles and figure out what interests you within this, whatever subfield you're interested in. Type in keywords, follow the citations and just kind of go into little rabbit holes. I mean, honestly, that's what I did for the PhD, but that's also what I did in undergrad. I explored a lot of research opportunities just by being this paper is interesting and this guy works at my school. So I'm gonna go work for him and see what it's like,
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's really interesting just to think about. I think a lot of times when I'm interviewing people on this podcast, we think definitely high level existentially of how do I get into this? But there really is just the tangible stuff of scholar.google.com. What I've never heard of that. The other thing I wanted to ask you about kind of on that same vein is I think another thing that feels daunting about being a PhD and full-time student, even when you're getting paid to be a student, is I know it can be in some scenarios not great money.
It's not amazing. It's often a living wage, but not enough to have fun.
Is it something that you feel a lot of people do have other jobs?
I think it just depends on like where you are and who you are, and if you want to be very involved in things that are not offered by your institution. Because like usually you can access things like a gym and, you know, whatever institutional events or activities that they're hosting, you can access those at like a reasonable price. But like in the city, in New York, it's so hard to do anything outside of the institution that and work within your budget. You know,
I mean,
so
living in New York is
right.
expensive.
Living in New York is expensive. And like, if you want to like go out and have a good time, that's probably more expensive and not within your budget. So like I usually have small jobs on the side. They're not consistent. And if I don't have them, I can still like live and get by. But I like having a little extra. So
yeah, I mean, slay.
Yeah.
What did you want to be when you grew up? Like thinking childhood.
So I think I was like an incredibly practical child. And I mean, you know, the school I went to in New Jersey, it's like very career oriented. And I think I was always
it was Montclair Kimberly, right? Or no?
Wow. No, it was Newark Academy.
It was Newark Academy, but
famously MKA's mortal enemy.
Yeah. So the reason I said that is because I was like, it's one of those
one of
two,
the two. Yeah,
and I couldn't remember which one. Yeah. Okay. Newark Academy.
Yeah. Newark Academy.
If you went to Newark Academy and you're listening, or Montclair Kimberly is their tea.
No, I mean, I'm like very happy I got, you know, the education that was offered to me there, but it was, I don't think I ever like dreamed of things beyond practical careers. Do you know what I mean? Like I was never like, I'm going to be an astronaut, because I was like, no, I'm probably gonna be like a consultant or, you know, like an environmental engineer, lawyer, doctor, but like specifically an orthopedic surgeon. And I'm going to go do my residency at this place. You know, like it was very practical, very, I don't think I ever had kind of these like crazy out there ideas of what I wanted to do. I definitely wanted to be a doctor though for a long time.
Well, you're gonna be.
Yeah. And PhDs had that term first.
So period.
So I'm actually the original doctor.
Yeah, whatever. I mean, in 3 years.
In 3 years.
I can't wait.
3 to 4. We'll see.
When you think about like your career and everything you're studying now and you're working on all these different projects, like what do you feel yourself connecting to the most, that like you feel that you're seeing yourself focus on more in the next coming years?
In terms of like what projects I'm interested in?
Like what science you're working on?
Well, I'm very interested in like the human environment interaction side of things, because I think that it has been so poorly done in the past. In terms of like generally when you're talking about human environment interactions, a lot of the times people are referring to like how climate affected indigenous populations in various places. And the way in which they have done that is just completely inappropriate. And I hate to say like ascientific, but just not appropriate, not good, not correct, and not ethical.
Mm-hmm.
And I am drawn to understanding like climatic context for human migration and sociocultural developments and stuff, and doing it well, and doing it from like a perspective that is informed by the classes I've taken in anthropology and history, and trying to right the wrongs a little bit of telling these stories, because they have often been told just like not in great ways. So.
I mean, this is a great testament to what you were saying about like taking history classes in tandem. Like,
yes,
it's not just about what are the rocks telling us. It's also like,
I'm definitely drawn to that. I'm interested in like telling people's stories in an ethical and
when you say it's been unethical thus far, I mean, like, I know the way that this country has treated indigenous people is unethical. Yes, being generous.
So like an example is talking about, okay, so one thing you'll see in scientific literature is talking about how climate, I mean, they do this in so many different fields, in anthropology as well, and like older anthropological literature, but talking about indigenous people in like 1200, 1300 as ancient. Like you would never call like Christopher Columbus 1400s. Like you would never say, oh, the ancient peoples, you know, of Europe. Like, and they're not.
Meanwhile, that's a recent time.
That's very, as we know.
It's not even deep time.
It's not deep time. No, I mean, it's the kind of treating indigenous people as these like ancient others. Yeah. When they're fully living at the same time as
I feel like I'm acknowledging this a lot recently. Like the concept of us like studying history and living in a post-historic time when we're like experiencing all of the same shit that we've read about in our textbooks of like genocide and, you know, when we look at things like, you know, past historical events, like with indigenous people in this country or with slavery or whatever.
Yeah.
We talk about it so historically, and it's actually so incredibly recent.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's so recent. And I think that people have just done kind of a terrible job of talking about so like the example with Rapa Nui is that there's kind of this idea that there was an ecocide where the Rapa Nui people like arrived on this island in 1300 whenever, and destroyed it, essentially destroyed the landscape. And then there was this big demographic collapse and there was a big war, and it was all because these people kind of ruined their own environment and didn't know what they were doing. And that's, first of all, just wrong. Like, there are so many factors at play too. And also people just like storytelling with other people's culture. There was this, great big war that isn't actually evidenced in archaeological history. And there's, this huge demographic collapse, and that also isn't really evidenced in archaeological history. And people people just like playing with like indigenous stories in a way that isn't very human. It's almost like mystical. People love treating indigenous cultures as mystical. And I am like interested in going to spaces where we are invited and they want us to do work there, and treating them like they are humans, and that people of the past are also humans who respond to things on human timescales in human ways. Like the thing that I'm interested in working on right now is like, okay, if there's changing rainfall on this island, how do people actually react to that? What does it actually cause? Okay, so let's say our resources are diminished. Okay, maybe resources over here in this part of the island are more diminished than this part of the island. Okay, could that lead to some sort of conflict? And how would we understand that? But also here are some other options. And, just like treating it as a human issue as opposed to like mystical kind of storytelling.
How are you then able to, how does this information then get spread? Because I think a lot of like kind of what you're talking about sounds like really familiar of just like the way that this country like paints the past of like, everything. Like how do we take this truth that you've got facts behind it?
Well, yeah, I mean, the thing about all science, right, is it's you're doing the best with the tools that you have. So nothing is necessarily certain. We have all of this evidence of one thing, we could have all this evidence of another, and you're kind of stacking them up against each other and trying to understand where the reality sits. But yeah, so in general, like you do work like this and then you publish it in some sort of publication, and you might try to get some sort of press release. But I think that I'm very, I don't know, I'm kind of wary of like doing this work when it is not, I would never want to do this work when it is not explicitly invited, and to share it in ways that are, I'm still trying to get around how to share it. And I obviously want to work with communities to do it well. Do it with the communities that, we are working with. But I don't know, there's a whole history of like geological extraction from the global south that you have to think about. And I don't know, I'm very tied up in all of that and trying to understand how to do this better than other people have in the past, ethically speaking.
What do you feel the hardest part about like your job today is?
I guess understanding where to go from here. Like, I think it's hard as a climate scientist and in a lot of professions where you get into it because you have a desire to use the tools and the skills that you have to help people. Like, I think that's why a lot of people get into climate science, because they're interested in helping people in some way.
Thinking about like future.
Thinking about the future.
Right.
But you have to understand how climate has changed in the past to understand how it will change in the future. Because ultimately we're trying to understand how the Earth system works. I think a lot of people get into this field to do that. And then it kind of feels like, I don't know. It's hard to do that. It's really hard to do that. And, you can go continue to do research, but maybe that doesn't feel like enough. Or you could go work for a startup that's doing carbon capture, but sometimes that feels like just putting a Band-Aid on the problem when it would be way more satisfying to get at the root of it, of the fact that we're emitting so much carbon in the United States in the first place. Yeah, I think the hardest part of this job and other jobs, like I think biomedical sciences, you might experience the same thing, is that people join with the intention of doing good. And then you realize that there is so much bad that has already been done. And it's really hard to like go from here.
Stay positive about it. How do you feel like you get over that? Like, how do you stay in
Oh my God, I don't. I don't at all. I like ruminate. I mean, you know, it's obviously hard to live in America and have a job in America and opt out of all of the terrible things that America has done and like, you know, kind of Western nations as a whole. And you can't really opt out of it. And trying to do good within that framework is really challenging. And yeah, so I just think about it all the time. I don't know.
Well, if anyone has advice for Red,
how do I
get out of this doom?
How do I get out of, not even that, how do I get out of like,
I feel like you have too much information too. It like makes it worse.
I know, right? Because I take all
you
of these
really
classes.
know what's going on with the climate.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, that's fair.
Yeah.
I have some rapid fire questions
Please.
for you.
Sorry that got so dark.
Well,
I mean, I figured it might with the whole climate change.
I think about this every day.
Yeah.
Will we live to see? I don't know.
Oh, I mean, I think that is so dependent on who you are and how much privilege you have and like where you live.
That's fair.
So,
hottest part about your current job?
Traveling is really fun. I enjoy being able to like go to places I wouldn't be able to access otherwise, or would never think to go otherwise. Going to Norway, that was super cool. Going to Greenland was really cool. Yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Fun.
Seeing the world.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. That is hot. Misconception about your job.
I think that there's just so many misconceptions about science in general and how it works. And I don't know that I have time to get into all of them, but I think the biggest misconception about being a scientist is just a misunderstanding of what science is, and kind of what facts are and what data is and what it all means. Like there's a human behind all of this interpreting everything. And, you know, numbers are not just numbers. They are interpreted to mean something by people. So, yeah, I guess the biggest misconception is just kind of a misunderstanding of what scientific research is. Yeah.
Hottest job you've ever had?
Hottest job I've ever had? Oh, okay, this is so unrelated, but I arrange flowers at a farmer's market every Saturday.
Where is it?
Abingdon Square in the West Village.
Is that continuing for like the summer?
I don't know if I'm going to be there every Saturday, but I'm hopefully going to be working a few more times at least this summer.
I would like to make it.
Yeah, you should come. I'll make you a
haven't
bouquet.
been able to make it the past 2 times you posted.
I have like a bunch of named bouquets. I don't have a Chloe, but I can make a Chloe.
I mean,
like different color schemes.
No one's
have different
ever named a
names.
bouquet after me.
I'll name a bouquet after you.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Hardest job you ever had?
Is it okay that this is so unrelated to science?
No, that's
okay.
perfect.
Cool. I was a dog grooming assistant when I
Okay.
was 16. I'm allergic to dogs. I learned that through the job. Also,
That is hard.
dogs really don't like being groomed. Like you think, oh, I'm going to come in there and it's going to be a bunch of cute dogs and they're going to love me. I'm the fucking dryer. I'm blow drying them. They hate me. They want to kill me. They want to bite me. And it takes so long to blow dry a golden doodle. It's disgusting.
Moose,
it
cover
takes
your ears.
so long. Their legs hold so much water. You think you're done and then you like press it and it's like a sponge.
Yeah, Moose does not like to be blow dried.
It's terrible.
I mean, I don't blow dry him. If it's like, I mean, I put out some towels and we kind of vibe.
Yeah. Yeah. But they're not fans. So that, and I'm allergic. And so that was really hard. And then the same summer I was also working as a busser at a restaurant that was on Kitchen Nightmares. So it was kind of a hard summer for me. Yeah.
All right. Well, you made it through.
I did.
When was that?
I think
you said 16?
I was 16 or 17.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Something like
You've
that.
totally made, like, you seem totally healed from that experience.
I've healed. Yeah.
Great. What do you want to be when you grow up now?
I mean, I really don't know. I would say as of now, I would love to be a professor because I do really enjoy research and I really enjoy teaching. Practically speaking, there are a lot of things that come with being a professor that I think people don't know about. Like the process of becoming a professor is really hard and typically requires a lot of mobility that I don't really see myself having in terms of, you know, picking up every 2 years and going to get a different research position, kind of building up your resume. And that can be great for some people, but I really love New York City and I don't really want to leave. So I'm figuring that out, but ultimately it would be to be a professor.
Cool. I could see you as Dr. Stein. We already
Dr.
talked about this.
Stein.
If you were to give one piece of advice to someone who is thinking about going to get a PhD, whether it's in science or otherwise, but they're like, maybe they've got a day job, maybe they're in school, like they're thinking about that next step, like what would that be?
I mean, I think I'd have a better time giving advice to people who are in school, which is just do everything and do it 100%. Give it everything you have. Can be totally random projects here, random projects here. Like getting yourself into a niche is how you figure out if you like that niche. So it's great to take classes and kind of skim the surface at certain subject matters. But like, if you want to figure out if you're into studying, aeronautical device design, go design an aeronautical device. You know what I mean? Like, find opportunities.
I mean, somewhat,
and the
yeah.
the other thing I think just generally in terms of like getting those opportunities and succeeding in this kind of world is that you just have to be like so confident, and you just have to go for everything and talk to professors as if your ideas are worthy of respect, because they are. Like, people are not often going to hire you as a research assistant if you say, I have no idea what I'm doing and I don't know why I want to be here and I don't know what you do and I don't know whatever. Go into it with confidence. Fake it, say that even if you don't believe it yet, say that you have ideas that are worthy of respect, and go and get those research opportunities that you need to get to figure out what you like.
I love that. And I feel like that advice could be applied to a lot of different facets of life.
Yeah. I mean, like, I think it's nice when you can do that in college, because you can kind of toe the line of arrogance just a little bit and then find out and then learn from that. You know what I mean? Like, you can test it. But I think people come into these spaces so not like having no confidence and feeling like imposters. And I think everyone feels like that a little bit. But if you just pretend, eventually it feels real. So
that's really good advice. I mean, I try and tell myself that every day, just like in everything I do. So.
I mean, I feel like so confident in my ability to conduct research and do that well. Some days I feel like I can't do anything in research, but that doesn't matter. I'm going to project that, and I'm going to like remind myself of that.
Right.
And it's kind of just a fake it till you make it thing.
I love it. Yeah. Well, you're slaying it. You definitely have convinced me. On that note, what do you have to plug? I know you've got some research papers. Like, tell us.
I don't know that I have things to plug.
Do you want to plug anything? I mean,
I'll plug the Abingdon Square Farmers Market Saturday mornings. Come get flowers from Silver Petals Farm. They are wonderful people with wonderful, wonderful flowers. Also, look out for a paper about storm frequency over Rapa Nui within some time frame I'm not willing to offer. So
okay, perfect. Well, we'll keep our eyes peeled for that, and when it's ready, like I'll let you know. We'll post it on Instagram, and you guys will be able to circle back to it.
Yeah, exactly.
Slav, well, thank you so much for coming here and honestly like teaching me something really interesting.
Thanks for having me.
I love it. Thanks everyone. See you guys next week.